There is a city that spent 30 years convincing the world it had solved something. Not just built something impressive, though it certainly did that. It convinced people it had solved the fundamental anxiety of being wealthy in an unstable world. Come here, it said. Park your money here. Raise your children here. Build your office here. Nothing will touch you. That promise had a name. People called it Dubai. And then, in the final days of February 2026, people who had paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to live inside that promise started paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to escape it. That image matters. Not because it means Dubai is finished, but because of what it reveals about the nature of the promise itself, who it was really made to, how thin the foundation beneath it actually was, and what happens to a city built entirely on the confidence of people who have no obligation to stay. That is what this video is about. Let us go back to how good it looked, because it genuinely looked extraordinary. In 2025 alone, nearly 10,000 millionaires relocated to Dubai. They brought an estimated $63 billion with them, a figure that exceeded every other city in the world by a significant margin. They came from the United Kingdom, fleeing new inheritance taxes. They came from China, hedging against domestic policy uncertainty. They came from India, from Russia, from across Europe, each with their own calculation, all of them arriving at the same conclusion. Dubai is the place. Zero income tax, zero capital gains, long-term visas tied to real estate investment, a government that moved fast, built well, and stayed out of your bank account. The math was compelling, and for a long time the math was right. But there was something else underneath the math, something harder to quantify and more important than any tax rate. Dubai was selling a feeling, the feeling that the chaos of the rest of the world simply did not apply here. You could watch the news from your penthouse on the Palm and feel genuinely insulated from it. You could have a meeting in the morning, lunch on a rooftop with views of the Gulf, and fly to 3 other countries before the week was over, all from a city that felt permanent and frictionless and completely in control of its own destiny. That feeling was the real product. The tax advantages were the headline. The feeling was what kept people there. Hotels were running above 80% occupancy month after month. The airport was on track to set another passenger record. Real estate transactions the prior year had reached $250 billion in a city of 4 million people. Dubai had positioned itself not just as a tourist destination, but as a genuine global hub, the place where wealthy families from every continent could find common ground, do business, enroll their children in international schools, and enjoy a level of infrastructure that most Western cities had stopped being able to promise. Restaurants that would be celebrated in any major capital, healthcare that ranked with the best in the region, a calendar of events that ran year-round and seemed to expand every season. The pitch was real. The delivery was largely real. That is what made the collapse so jarring when it came, because the collapse, when it came fast. On the last day of February 2026, after a military offensive against Iran, Tehran retaliated. Missiles and drones hit targets across the Gulf. Some struck near the Palm Jumeirah. A plume of smoke rose above one of Dubai's most recognizable luxury hotel corridors. And that image traveled around the world faster than any official statement could contain it. Dubai International Airport, the busiest international aviation hub on the planet, suspended operations. Not reduced, suspended. What followed was not a gradual slowdown. It was a cliff. Hotel occupancy, which had been running near 85% at the start of the year, collapsed to between 15 and 20% within 2 weeks. Luxury properties that had been selling rooms at $600 a night were offering suites at a fraction of that, not as promotions, but as survival tactics. One estimate put the daily revenue loss to the Gulf tourism industry at $600 million. Airlines canceled tens of thousands of flights. Europe's largest travel company pulled every single Dubai package from its inventory. Cruise lines rerouted every vessel away from Gulf itineraries. The events calendar, the conferences, the exhibitions, the music festivals that had become central to Dubai's identity as a global meeting point, all of it paused simultaneously. And then came the part that made for the most striking images. The wealthy started leaving, not quietly, urgently. Private jet brokers reported demand surging to levels they could not meet. Charter flights that normally cost tens of thousands of dollars were going for 200,000 euros and still selling out. Wealthy families drove 4 hours across the border to Oman, then another 10 hours if necessary to reach Saudi Arabia because that was how you got to an airport that was still functioning. Private security firms booked fleets of vehicles for finance executives who needed to be out of the country before the situation escalated further. People who had moved to Dubai specifically because it offered a safe exit from everywhere else were now engineering their own exit from Dubai. Evrim, and a mother of two from Turkey who had been living near Palm Jumeirah, told reporters simply, "When we saw the fire, we said it is time to go." That sentence contains the entire problem. Because Dubai's product was never really the weather, or the restaurants, or even the tax advantages, though those were real benefits. Dubai's core product was the feeling that you would never have to say that sentence. The city sold the experience of watching the world's instability from a safe distance, through floor-to-ceiling windows in an air-conditioned tower, with a cocktail in hand and your assets properly structured. The moment that feeling broke, the product broke with it. Not for everyone, not permanently, but it broke. Now here's where the story gets more important than the headline. Every account of what happened in early 2026 frames it as an outside event hitting a healthy city, a geopolitical shock disrupting a boom. And that framing is understandable because the city did look like a boom from the outside, but several of the people whose job it is to read markets rather than market them had already identified serious structural pressure building inside Dubai before any of this happened. The real estate market had been flagged by one of the world's most respected financial institutions as carrying elevated bubble risk, the highest jump in that risk of any major city analyzed that year, driven by property prices that had risen roughly 50% in 5 years, while incomes had not kept pace. A major credit rating agency had forecast a price correction of up to 15% for 2026, even without any external shock. New construction permits were climbing toward levels that had historically preceded years of sluggish transactions. More than 300,000 residential units were in the development pipeline for the years ahead. None of that caused the crisis, but all of it shaped how deep the crisis cut. And it tells you something important. The system was already under pressure when the pressure arrived from outside. A healthy structure can absorb a shock. A structure that was already stressed absorbs it very differently. There is also a deeper question that nobody in Dubai's promotional apparatus ever wanted to answer directly, because answering it honestly would have complicated the sales pitch. What exactly is Dubai for? Not in the tourist brochure sense, in the civic sense. What holds it together when the external incentives shift? When the tax advantages narrow, when a regional competitor offers a better package, when the safety narrative takes a visible hit, what remains? What is the thing you cannot replicate somewhere else? For cities with deep cultural roots, the answer is obvious. Paris has something that cannot be moved. Tokyo has centuries of layered identity. Even a relatively young city like Singapore has built an institutional culture, a legal tradition, a sense of civic seriousness that gives people reasons to stay that go beyond the terms of their visa. Dubai, for all its extraordinary achievements in infrastructure and urban development, never fully answered that question. It offered world-class everything. And world-class everything, it turns out, can be offered elsewhere. There is a structural fact about Dubai that does not appear in any tourism brochure, but that governs everything about how the city functions under pressure. 88% of the people who live in the United Arab Emirates are foreign nationals, not permanent residents with legal rights that bind them to the place, not citizens with civic stakes in the city's long-term future. Temporary residents whose entire relationship with Dubai is, by the design of the system itself, conditional. The Golden Visa, which was Dubai's great innovation in attracting global talent, gives you 10 years of residency in exchange for investment. It does not give you the kind of civic belonging that makes leaving feel like a loss. It gives you excellent terms on a renewable contract. And that is a profound difference. A professional who built a life in a European capital has roots that are costly and complicated to severe. A professional in Dubai on a golden visa, whose lease renews annually, whose children attend international schools where other families rotate in and out every few years, whose entire social infrastructure is made of people in a similar situation, has a relationship with the city that can be reconsidered with relative efficiency. Dubai built its growth on mobile capital and mobile people. Those same people can mobilize in the other direction. And this was not a secret. It was baked into the system by design. The emirate never offered mass permanent residency. It never opened a pathway to citizenship for the vast majority of its residents. And the implicit agreement was always this: we give you the best conditions in the world, and you give us your presence and your capital. And we both understand that this is a transaction, not a marriage. For years, that agreement worked beautifully. Both sides got what they wanted. But a transaction by its nature can be renegotiated or canceled. Here is the uncomfortable internal voice that carries more weight than any foreign critic, because it comes from someone who committed everything to the Dubai story. Natasha Sideris built one of Dubai's most beloved hospitality brands over a decade, 14 outlets, more than 1,000 employees, a business that had survived multiple global disruptions, that had been celebrated in the city's food culture, that had become woven into the daily life of the professional expat community that Dubai had spent years cultivating. She described what happened to her business after the conflict as nothing short of devastating. Faced with revenue that had simply stopped arriving, she told the media she had a choice between firing 30% of her staff immediately or cutting everyone's salary by 30%, including her own. She chose the salary cuts. That is not the testimony of someone who invested in a passing trend. That is someone who went all in on the Dubai promise and found herself facing its limits in real time. She is not alone. She is representative. Now look at the same event through 3 different sets of eyes, because the impact was not uniform. It never is in Dubai. The city has always run on 3 parallel economies. 3 parallel realities stacked inside the same skyline. The billionaire tier felt the crisis as a logistical emergency with a solution. You call your security firm, you get in an armored vehicle, you drive to Oman, you board a charter, you go somewhere else. Inconvenient, expensive, but manageable because that level of wealth is almost by definition distributed across multiple jurisdictions. No single city is indispensable when you own pieces of several. The ultra-rich who evacuated in early March were not primarily the tax-motivated millionaires who had relocated permanently. They were the ultra-wealthy in transit, on holiday, on business trips, people whose primary residence might have been Dubai, but whose financial exposure certainly was not. For this tier, the question is not survival, it is reassessment, e.g. whether Dubai remains worth the allocation. Whether the risk-adjusted return on keeping a significant portion of your life there still makes sense after what just happened. The professional middle class, the lawyers and engineers and finance managers and hospitality operators who relocated to Dubai for the salary premium and the lifestyle, felt it entirely differently. These are people whose employer may now be reconsidering whether the Dubai office makes long-term sense, whose spouse is asking serious questions that did not have easy answers before and have harder ones now, whose children are midway through a school year with friendships and routines that matter. For this tier, the event was not a crisis with a charter jet solution. It was a stress test of an entire life decision, applied suddenly and without warning. And the stress test revealed something important. The life they had built in Dubai was excellent under normal conditions, and extremely fragile the moment those conditions shifted. And for the workers who form the invisible base of the city, the hotel staff, the construction crews, the drivers, the people who send most of their monthly income home to families and countries they are keeping afloat from a distance, there is no tier of resilience to fall back on. No diversified asset portfolio to draw down. No family office in another jurisdiction. Reports from hospitality workers across multiple properties described salary cuts of nearly half, forced unpaid leave, and redundancies that arrived without notice. These are people for whom a month of disrupted income is not a line item on a quarterly report. It is a family in the Philippines or Pakistan or Kenya that stops receiving the transfer they built their plans around. It is a crisis with no cushion and no safety net, in a country where your legal right to remain is tied directly to your continued employment. Dubai without income. Dubai without tourists. Dubai without the confidence of the people who make it run. Each level experiencing a different version of the same collapse. Three versions of the same city. Three completely different experiences of the same 2 weeks. And only one of them with the resources to simply leave and try somewhere else. Here's the honest assessment of what comes next. Because this channel does not deal in catastrophism, and it does not deal in false comfort either. Operationally, Dubai will recover. It already was recovering as of early April 2026. Adi airports were resuming operations. Airlines were rebuilding their schedules. The government moved quickly and competently to deploy economic support, subsidizing the hospitality sector and waiving fees to keep businesses intact during the lull. A ceasefire created the conditions for tourism bookings to start cautiously returning. The infrastructure is there. The institutional capability is there. The sovereign wealth is there. A disrupted few weeks does not erase a decade of genuine development, and it does not eliminate a genuinely advantageous geographic and financial position. Dubai has come back from serious disruptions before. The 2009 debt crisis, the 2020 pandemic, which emptied the city's streets and produced some of the most jarring images of an empty Burj Khalifa district anyone had ever seen. Both times, the recovery came faster than critics predicted, and the years that followed produced some of the city's strongest numbers. That resilience is documented. It is real. Ignoring it would be dishonest. But here's the distinction that almost no one is making clearly, and it is the most important one in this entire analysis. Operational recovery and perceptual recovery are two entirely different timelines with two entirely different outcomes. Operations come back in weeks. The image of smoke rising above Palm Jumeirah, the footage of billionaires queuing for charter jets in Muscat, the news reports of hotel occupancy levels not seen since the deepest weeks of the pandemic, those images now live permanently in the minds of the exact people Dubai needs to make the decision to come. Not the people who are already there and have built lives, and the people who are still deciding. A family in London reconsidering a Dubai relocation for 2027 is making that decision with different information than they had in January. A company deciding between Dubai and Singapore for its regional headquarters is running a different risk model. An investor comparing Dubai and Riyadh for real estate allocation is looking at a map where Riyadh just opened its property market to foreign buyers and did not have missiles flying overhead. The competitive landscape for exactly the kind of capital and talent Dubai was attracting has shifted at the exact moment Dubai's core narrative took its most visible hit in years. Dubai sold certainty. Certainty has been repriced, not eliminated, not destroyed, repriced. And in a market that runs entirely on confidence, repricing certainty is not a minor adjustment. It is a recalibration of the entire value proposition. The city will survive. The skyline will remain. The infrastructure will function. The tax advantages are unchanged. But the version of Dubai that seemed like a genuine exception to Middle Eastern geopolitics, the version that could watch regional instability from a comfortable distance and market that distance as its primary product, that version is gone. What replaces it will depend on decisions being made right now. In government offices in Abu Dhabi, in family offices in London and Mumbai and Zurich, and in the personal calculations of millions of ordinary people who are quietly, without press releases or public announcements, revising their answer to the question, is Dubai still the place? If you are one of those people, if you live there, if you left, odds if you had the move planned and now you are not sure, I want to hear your answer. Not the abstract version, the real one. The one you have been thinking about at 2 in the morning when the news is still on and you are not sure what it means for the decision you already made or the one you still have to make. Leave it in the comments. Because no dataset captures what you know from the inside. And if this kind of honest, data-grounded analysis of what is actually happening in the cities and markets that shape how the world's wealth and people move is what you are looking for, you already know what to do.